how can you become the guest editor of a journal to publish a special issue? Stick around and find out the 5 key steps that you need to take to get it done here today on Navigating Academia. Welcome to Navigating Academia, your leading source for guidance on how to advance your academic career. As always, I appreciate the love, so please do like and share this video with your colleagues, subscribe to our channel, hit that bell and comment below. You can follow me on the social media channels below at these accounts. So let's jump right in. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that you may not have even thought of before or maybe even heard of before, either because you didn't think it was possible or a thing or because you didn't know where to start. And that's how to become the guest editor of a peer-reviewed journal, an academic journal, in order to publish a so-called special issue. So first things first, number one, what's a guest editor? So when it comes to peer review publishing, each journal has a head, and this head is referred to as the editor of the journal. They're kind of the gateway to everything, right? You'll take your piece, you'll submit it via some online gateway usually, and it'll go to the editor. And the editor's the one who decides what happens. Either does it go through to the peer review process, in which case they'll assign it to an associate editor who will assign it to an editorial review board member or an outside expert for peer review. Then it'll come back to the associate editor, and then again, the final say is with that editor, the main editor, right? Or it's something where the editor will take a look and say, you know what? It's not a good fit, or the piece just isn't high quality enough for whatever reason, we're going to go ahead and reject it. And hopefully that rejection comes as quickly as possible so that you can move on to your next potential source of publication. But in any case, the editor is the head honcho of a journal. So obviously, if that's something that you're interested in becoming one day, or simply an experience that you would like to have without having to go through the arduous, often decades-long process of building your publication record as well as building your brand in the field, right? Your name in the field to the point where you can become the editor of a journal, instead becoming a guest editor for a special issue is a great option. And essentially what that means is for one issue of that journal, you will be the head honcho, okay? Now that issue is what is referred to as a special issue. It's not a normal issue of the journal where people are going to submit on a myriad of different topics and then they'll be kind of clumped together in the same issue by the associate editor and the editor. It's not going to be the case. Instead, a special issue is an issue of the journal that's focused on a very specific theme, meaning that all of the different articles that are in it are on that theme. It's not that you're going to have some articles, I used to be in forensic psychology, on fire setting, and some on juvenile sexual offenders, and some on domestic violence risk assessment. No, they would all be on the topic of, let's say, domestic violence and how to assess and prevent that. So this is a special issue. Now the final question, of course, the no duh, is why would you want to do this? And the answer is for a few reasons. Number one is to be able to significantly increase your personal brand as an academic, to be able to also have the opportunity to network with colleagues in the field, to be able to boost your reputation also within your department such that you have more opportunities for advancement. For example, getting promoted, having more opportunities. Let's say that you work for a private hospital, you want to go to a conference, right? It'll boost your reputation and the awareness of management to be able to provide you, let's say, with some ancillary funding to be able to go to that conference. There's all sorts of reasons, all of which are positive, in addition to it just being a milestone in your academic career. So what we're going to do is talk about the key steps that you need to take to get this done, to be able to secure and then follow through on making a special issue of a journal with you as the guest editor. Step number one is to choose a niche topic. You need an underlying theme which each one of those articles in your special issue is going to address in some way, shape, or form. To give you two practical examples, I've been the guest editor of a number of special issues over the years. Two that come to mind immediately, one of them is on international perspectives on violence risk assessment, which was my main field when I was in forensic mental health research. And the idea was to be able to have a series of articles that were all from colleagues from different countries, which talked about the state of the art of violence risk assessment in their countries. And what we did is that we went around and we identified kind of the leading scholars and we got them all together. And so all, however many, 5, 6, I honestly forget, articles were in the special issue, all had to do with that underlying theme. Another example was a special issue that I did all about methodology, and the methodology was focused on something called predictive validity, which is a form of criterion validity where essentially you try to establish the relationship between two things. In this case, it was trying to predict the likelihood of violence using these checklists that we refer to as risk assessment tools. Now, there's all sorts of different statistics that are used in any field where stats is apropos. However, oftentimes there's a series of statistics that are commonly used where when new stats and new methodologies come out, they're basically not popularized or simply eschewed because the stuff that's already being used seems to work well enough according to the people in power in your field, the people who publish the most, the people who've been in the field the longest, and of course those people train students who end up, being the next leaders, etc. And this can go on for generations, meaning that when it comes to methodologies, you could be totally behind the times. And when it came to violence risk assessment, largely speaking, that was the case, and we wanted to shed light on that. So again, we got a series of authors together to write different pieces on different kinds of methodologies within that specific niche field. So that's step number 1. Pick your theme. Step number 2 is choosing a journal. Choosing a journal that's got a good reputation and, if possible, has the readership and impact factor, high impact factor, that you're looking for. Choosing the journal is an essential step in this process. The idea, of course, is not to do a special issue only to be able to get work out there on something you're passionate about. You want to make sure people are actually reading that and that it's the right people reading it, and also that it's going to help your career. And the way to do that is making sure that the journal that you publish in is one that you've researched. You've gone on to something like Google Scholar or any other kind of journal-related database, or something like ResearchGate or academia.edu, and identify the journals that are really the leaders in whatever your field is. And it could be the leaders in terms of how high the impact factor is. It could be the leaders because the largest associations, member associations, they publish that journal, meaning that it's disseminated to more people, right? Or it could be something where just you're really in that niche area in the first place, so you don't really have any other options. And if you took that special issue to a more general journal, the likelihood is higher that they would say no because it's not of interest to enough of their readership. And keep in mind that these journals, these academic publishing companies, they're businesses, right? If it's something where, you've got a series of articles from different leading authors who are going to get stuff read and subsequently cited, oh my goodness, the journals are businesses. They're going to want that, right? So you're doing them a favor just as much as they're doing you a favor. So really never forget about that when you're approaching this. Don't think that, this is only for you and that you have to, this is only something that, you deserve, etc., etc. This is a transaction that's going on here, all right? So remember, when it comes to the impact factor, which is a metric used to be able to rank journals in terms of, on average, how many articles are they publishing relative to how often are those articles cited, and of course this is a proxy for the influence of the articles with regard to their citation count, and they refer to that influence as impact. Your field, whatever it is going to have a variety of different journals. Take a look at what they are, identify the impact factor if they have one, and try to stay away from the journals that don't have an impact factor whatsoever. If they don't have an impact factor, it could be the case that they're newer, for example, in which case you could publish in them as an investment for later in your career, whether they may have an impact factor, or you can simply say, you know what? I'll come back to this journal for a future special issue. Right now, I want to go to one that maybe has a bit better of a reputation with regards to an impact factor being attached to it, right? So those are the key things to look for in a journal, but be selective. Step number 3 is to identify research papers for your special issue by contacting researchers. Now, it's important to note that there's really 2 ways to do special issues. The first is to be able to lock it down, right? So basically you would start with step 4, essentially, right? Step 4 is going to have to do with getting in touch with the editor of your target journal, right? And some people would say, no, just do that. Get the green light to do the special issue, and then you can go to different researchers and say, hey, I got a special issue, here's the theme, please submit something on it, right? Or you put out a general call for papers, and that call for papers will bring in individuals, right? But my recommendation from my experience and what's worked best is to start with this as step 3, identifying papers by contacting researchers. And you want 3 kinds of professionals, okay? Number 1 is big name researchers in your field. By the time that you've gotten to this point where you're ready to publish a special issue, you're going to know who the big dogs are within your niche. So make sure that you've developed relationships with them, or if nothing else, that you've identified who they are in the first place, right? Because number 2 is closely related. The big dogs or any researchers in the field, maybe up and coming folks or folks just during their postdoctoral fellowship who just came out of grad school, these are researchers that you don't know personally, but you want to form a relationship with. And there's no better networking opportunity than a special issue because you have something to offer, right? You can go to them and say, hey, listen, here's a special issue, meaning that your likelihood of getting published is significantly higher than a general submission, and the theme is on something that you already know a lot about and probably have papers in process about because you're in that subfield as well. Inviting them to come on is going to build good faith and build that relationship with them. So it's a fantastic opportunity in that regard. And the third group of individuals are existing colleagues, folks that you already know, that you know are going to submit high quality contributions to the special issue. There'll always be folks, maybe it's your graduate supervisor or someone else you went to graduate school with, or a colleague that you've known and co-authored pieces with for years or had a recent good experience with. Whatever it is, it's important that you have a group of individuals that if nothing else you can go to and say, I've got this thing going on. I know you guys are going to do a great job. Do you have anything that you may want to submit? Obviously, just submitting to a special issue does not mean that you're going to get published in it by any means, but it's supply and demand. A special issue is by its nature special, meaning that it's on a niche or a specific theme that isn't something where there's a million papers on it, or there probably wouldn't be a special issue allowed in the first place. And because of that, the supply of potential papers is lower, and because of that, the demand for the papers that do get submitted are going to be higher, meaning that your likelihood of publication is higher. And that's a big reason to be able to do a special issue, and a big reason that your existing colleagues will want to get involved with that. Again, step number 4 is to contact the editor of the journal. Now, when you contact the editor, it's okay if you don't have a pre-existing relationship with them. Go on to something like Google Scholar, etc. Take a look at the work that they've done in the past. What have they been publishing on, past 2-3 years? What are their first author publications? The first author, if they're first author, then that means that it was their baby. If they're last author, it means that in many cases they were the supervisor, or at least the senior author, meaning that they're kind of the big deal in that field and help to guide the project or guide the paper in some way, shape, or form. So those are the articles you're going to want to look at. First author and last author publications. And just get a sense of who these people are. If possible, get introduced to the editor by a mutual colleague who knows you both. That's a great option to be able to make sure that, it doesn't come kind of out of the blue. But in my case, it's come out of the blue in a couple of situations and turned out great. So don't feel intimidated if you don't have that relationship already. It helps, but it's not required. When you email them, just let them know that you're very interested in putting together a special issue, and if you followed step 3, you've already got this laundry list of amazing, big name or up-and-coming researchers, as well as potentially the title or general area of the article that they want to submit. And if you're not taking that guidance in step 3 and instead you want to lock down the special issue first, then what you would do is say, I really want to put out a call for papers or an invitation for submissions, some people call it. They're synonymous terms. Then just let them know that you're very open to doing that. You can even draft one out. The idea is to get your foot in the door and show that you're committed, you're passionate, and that you're willing to put the work in. Because guest editing a journal is no joke for a special issue. It takes a lot of time. You are not going to get paid for it. And even though there's a lot of benefits for your career, it's not something to be taken lightly or something that you should consider some random side project. If you take this on and don't do a good job, it's going to follow you, and your reputation is going to seriously suffer because of it. So just take that into consideration before you take the leap. But I would highly recommend it. I really think it's worth it, and in my case, it certainly has been, especially because with these special issues, you can also submit your own work. However, you should not peer review it, obviously, and you should not be in charge of that peer review process. You should assign someone else. Maybe you have a co-editor for the special issue, right? Maybe they're more senior than you are, which would be great because it means that when you go to the editor of the actual journal, they'll come and say, oh, well, I may not know you, Jay, but I know Dr. Smith, and they're a great person to work with, so sure, why not? You're earlier in your career, but I trust Dr. Smith. That's also not a bad option, and in that case, any articles that you submit, make sure that the whole peer review process in terms of sending it out to potential reviewers and making the decision is not yours, because that would be unethical. Finally, we come to step 5, which is the simplest but the most arduous of all the pieces, which is to follow through. What's going to happen is that after you get your laundry list of articles that you believe that you should kind of put through the ringer of peer review, you'll identify potential peer reviewers either on the editorial board for that journal or individuals who are experts who you know or know at least they have that specialty, who you can email and request that they peer review that article or even batch of articles, because in some cases you may be in such a specific niche that there's only a tiny handful of experts who won't already be contributing who would be able to provide insightful peer reviews on the topic of the special issue. That can happen. That's happened to me one time, I remember. So what'll end up happening is that they provide the peer review, hopefully really good reviews in terms of how comprehensive they are, and then you as the guest editor, along with any co-editors you may have, you make the call as to whether or not that piece should be accepted with minor revisions, accepted with major revisions, or straight up rejected. Usually accepted with major revisions is where the majority of pieces lie. If you get an accept with minor revisions, I bow down to you, because that is very rare, especially for high impact journals or journals with just outstanding reputations. So don't be insulted if the piece gets rejected, and if it gets accepted with no changes, that's kind of a red flag. That's not a great news. That's a red flag that something's weird with the peer review process, just to let you know. Make sure that if that's the case, you really consider, do you want to publish in that journal? Because that could be a sign that, unless the guest editor or the editor makes some big deal about it in terms of it being the greatest thing that they've ever read, it's just not going to happen, right? It's a sign that, usually any comments that should have been made weren't made, not that there were no comments to be made in the first place, right? In any case, if you're the guest editor, though, you're making the call in terms of which of those 4 determinations to give the paper, and you have to let the authors know, and that can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable to go and say, hey, listen, we rejected the paper, right? But remember, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Be very respectful, very tactful, make sure that you really professionally draft that email, and if you've got a close set of colleagues, maybe somebody who's been an editor or at least a guest editor in the past, they can read that letter that you write, or you can even ask the editor of the journal itself, do you guys have a template that you send out? Because that'll make it less awkward, right? Now, in some cases, obviously, you're going to be accepting with minor revision or major revision, and in those cases, you're going to not only want to send that email, but also a list of the peer reviewers' comments that can be used to change right, the manuscript itself to be able to revise it so you can shine the thing up. And hopefully they'll send in time, revisions that go through one by one each of the concerns for each one of the peer reviewers that gave a peer review and talk about how they addressed it. In some cases, they're not going to address the comments, or they're going to skirt around the issue. And then it's your job as the editor to make the determination as to whether or not it's important to go back and say, listen, I just can't accept it unless you make those changes. Right? So it's going to be very important that you feel like you can take control of this situation. If you don't feel comfortable being in command, you should not start this process. And very rarely, but I suppose it could result in some bad blood between you and people whose papers you don't end up accepting for whatever reason. But make sure that you are willing to take on that big responsibility before you even get started in this process. Regardless, step 5, critical. Follow through on your promise to get this thing done for that journal. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. I want to hear from you in the comments section below. What would you like to publish a special issue on? And what do you think the best journal would be in terms of its fit to publish it in? Have you taken any steps to already start to get it done? Or maybe you have tips and tricks of your own that you'd like to share, and I want to hear about it, so please post it below along with any questions that you may have. Now, don't forget to like and share this video with your colleagues, subscribe to this channel, and follow us on social media. If you have interest in expanding your career, especially if it's something where you're looking for new sources of revenue other than your basic salary in academia, so you want that one-on-one career mentoring, set a consultation call with me via the website below. Signing off, everyone. Have a great day, and remember to get out there, take chances, and be your best self. Thank you so much for stopping by, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here as always. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more in this series on navigating academia, please click on one of these links over here to be able to view more original content. I hope to see you there.